You Should Know This Image by Bill Generu. So, welcome to You Should Know This Image. A few years ago, some colleagues and I got together and we put together a Pinterest board called You Should Know This Image. And together we just highlighted some of the main images of art history throughout the ages that we thought college students should know. So this talk is the result of that collaboration with my colleagues, and so we're going to highlight some of the greatest images throughout art history. Of course, it's not comprehensive. There's no way we can do thousands of years and touch on everything. I'm going to focus today primarily on the modern art period, and so we're going to go from there. If you're K-State students watching this, I'd ask that you get out a notebook and a pencil and start taking some notes, because there's going to be a quiz at the end of this week over this stuff. So I'd like you to take some notes. Don't try to write everything down. Don't record this. I'm recording this. You can watch this again on YouTube on my channel at BillGX, youtube.com/BILLGX, and just watch this thing again if you want. But yeah, take some notes and jot down the key ideas. So this is the process of thinking about what I'm presenting to you. What stands out as important? What's interesting to you? What do I seem to be most interested in? And so we'll have a conversation today about these different works of art. I have a large collection of books at home in my personal library of just art history. Renoir, Picasso, I've just got bunches and bunches of them. Hopper, these are all artists that we'll talk about today. So to start our talk, let's talk about the earliest known recordings of human ideas. These were painted on the walls of caves in France, and some are 30,000 years old. So these were our first images. Most of them are of animals, but they're images. It tells us about the human condition. For all of our history, we've been drawn to images. So that's why we're studying images this week in You Should Know This Image. Now, they've done research with the brain and have discovered that around 30% of our cerebral cortex is dedicated towards processing of vision. It's our most complicated sense. It takes a big chunk of our brain to do all of the work related to vision. In comparison, touch sense takes about 8% of the cortex. Hearing is in about 3% of the cortex. So it's 10 times as much to process the visual information as hearing. And so we're drawn to it, and we're returning back to our images as well. So I want to kind of go through images made throughout history, but like I said, we'll fast forward from the early ancient times. We'll skip over ancient art in the Middle Ages, and we're going to move right into more modern times, but we'll begin with the Renaissance. And so, yeah, I realize that we're skipping over a lot of important things, but we can look at those in another time. So let's discuss the Renaissance a little bit. It was a time of extraordinary creativity, and there's some artists who were active in this time that we should be familiar with. It's harvest time here in Kansas. A lot of trucks with corn and soybeans going to the elevator today. Okay, so let's talk about the Renaissance. The first painter I want to discuss is Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, so many people have heard of Leonardo da Vinci. He's probably one of the greatest artists of all time. He's certainly the painter of the world's most famous painting of all time. And of course, you might recognize him as a Ninja Turtle. He's the leader of the Ninja Turtles. The most famous painting in the world, of course, I'm referring to the Mona Lisa. Millions of people have seen it, painted in 1503, and her her smile is just one of the most famous things that you can ever see. If you get a chance to go see it, um, you have to go to France to see this one. Da Vinci was an Italian painter, but this painting is in the Louvre in France. Another painter that I want you to be familiar with is Michelangelo. Again, he's Italian, and he painted the Sistine Chapel. And he's another Ninja Turtle. How about that? He probably is one of the greatest artists who ever lived. You can go to Italy and see the Last Judgment, painted by Michelangelo. This is an altarpiece in the Sistine Chapel, and at the time it was offensive to some, to many, but it depicts the end days where the souls are sorted, the ones that are going to go up or go down. And Michelangelo did it. His self-portrait is in this. He's actually the skinned alive person. That's supposed to be him, I think. Also, he did the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel with the creation of Adam, and you can see there that there's a before and after. This painting was restored here in the past 15 or 20 years, I think now, and people were surprised by the vibrant colors that were used. It was, for centuries, it was kind of more the neutral browns and grays, and then but they discovered that the original was painted with these vibrant colors, and so now if you go to see it, that's what you'll see. You can also go to Italy and see David, and you can also see your study abroad Professor Blush when you see this one. So Michelangelo was a famous sculptor as well as painter. Another artist I'd like you to be familiar with is Rembrandt. Probably everyone's heard of Rembrandt. He's a Dutch painter. He may well be the greatest painter and artist of all time. I keep saying that. But yeah, he's very famous. Well, he's famous for his toothpaste, but he's also famous for the type of lighting that he used. Notice under the left eye in the portrait is a little triangle. That's called Rembrandt lighting, where they put that little triangle on the left cheek like that, and it's still used today. There's the little Rembrandt triangle. Okay, the next artist I want to tell you about is Gentileschi, Artemisia Gentileschi. So she's a female artist from the Renaissance, or probably the Baroque period, I think, is more when she was the style that she was known in. But anyway, Gentileschi, don't want to forget to include some female artists in this talk, and it was really unusual for artists to be female at the time, and yeah, she was like a superhero. She was a tough lady, and so her work was showing women taking it out on men usually. So this is Salome with the head of St. John the Baptist. There's another one where Judith is beheading her enemy. I won't show you that one, but if you look for this artist, you'll see lots of this type of art. There's a lot of violence in her, and the life that she lived, which she was violent. She was a victim of sexual assault, and just lived in challenging times, and so her art kind of expresses that. All right, so now we're going to zoom. We're going to fast forward from the 1600s into the 1800s. Again, just to get more into the modern art period. So let's talk a little bit about some pre-impressionism. So this is like the early 1800s into the 1860s, around the time of the American Civil War. So the first artist here I want to look at is Delacroix. He was a French artist, and the artwork I want to share with you on here is called Lady Liberty, painted in 1830. So this predates the French Revolution, but this painting was very very famous during the French Revolution. Actually, the royalty at the time were scandalized by this idea of freedom for the people was scary to the royalty, as history played out for them when they were overthrown and executed, so many of them. But yeah, so this is Lady Liberty. I want you to notice the realism of this image. So throughout the Renaissance and even into this pre-Impressionism period, it dealt in heroic scenes, a lot of scenes of the Greek gods even, and just mythical types of scenes. When we move into Impressionism, the scenes are going to be more ordinary, commonplace, everyday life kind of scenes, which was not done in art before that. Before that, art was used to tell morality tales or stories of heroism, stories to inspire us. And more modern art is more commentary on our current condition, the human condition. So, all right, so that's Delacroix. And another artist I want you to know about is Edward Manet. So Manet, that's what he looked like. So he's recent enough that they actually had photographs of him. And so this was a scandalous image by Manet. It was refused in they had a juried art show every year in Paris, and they refused it. So then they had another art show for the ones that didn't make the cut. So this was Déjeuner. It's a lunch party. And yeah, it features a nude woman in the center, and that's what was so scandalous at the time, for a lady to appear naked with some fully clothed gentlemen like this. Again, they've gotten away from the heroic scene. Nudity was common in artwork up to this point, but they were always doing something heroic, like the Lady Liberty. She's carrying the flag and fighting for freedom and that. Well, there's nothing heroic or extraordinary going on in this scene. They're having a party is what they're doing. So, but he's Manet's the father of modern art, because he's one of the first ones to experiment with shifting away from the traditional themes of what was then considered to be great art. So it's realistic. He still kind of uses that realistic style, but the theme is showing everyday people. So now we move into Impressionism. So Impressionism is really the very first modern art movement. Okay, and so this was the first time that painters they didn't try to create realistic paintings. They didn't smooth out and blend the colors as much. They just daubed the paint on and gave their impression. That's how the name came about. And so it was a new way of painting, and it was a new way of observing life. They wanted to show everyday people and also their impressions. And a lot of this development, what was driving this change was technological advances. Photography was coming into being an important technology. And so they had a way of recording realistic images through photographs and film and the camera. And so some artists felt like they needed to take art in a new direction. Okay, so here we have Claude Monet. Again, a French artist. He lived to be a very old man, and he painted for many, many years, but he was one of the very first Impressionists. So, in fact, one of his first famous artworks, this was called Impression Sunrise, and it was a mocking term. People latched onto that idea of impression. Well, this guy can't paint. He's just daubing paint on there. It looks like a child made this, those kind of comments. But if you look at it, he was trying to capture the impression of the light on the water. And you see, it depicts well the motion that was going on in the scene. It was unique for its time. People were scandalized by this, that he didn't take the time to blend the colors. He just put the raw colors on there and painted the impression. But as it turns out, so Impressionism came out in the 1870s. Here we are, 130 years later, even 140 years later. And it's still one of the most popular forms of art ever. People still love Impressionism. So Monet was one of the originators. He was known for painting his water scenes, also for painting haystacks, water lilies. You can see these massive paintings of water lilies in various art galleries around the world. I saw some in Pittsburgh, I believe it was. And they cover the entire wall. It looks like you can just walk into this scene. You can also visit the garden where he painted the water lilies. So that's still maintained just outside of Paris, I believe, in France. And you can go visit that actual garden where Monet lived. Next artist I'd like you to know about is Degas. So Edgar Degas was also a French artist. He was a famous painter of ballet dancers. Actually, I don't know if painting is, he used, what were they called? Pastels, like almost these chalk or oil pastels. He didn't always use brushwork, but he would lay down these layers. If you look at the skirts of the ballerinas, they seem almost translucent, and it was because of this impressionistic style that he was working in. So ballerinas, race horses was another one of his favorite memes. And also bathing ladies was another thing that he was hooked on. So I think many artists have been hooked on that theme of bathing ladies. Another artist from the Impressionist period was Renoir. He also lived to be a fairly old man, and so his artwork extended beyond the Impressionism, but the Impressionism is where he became famous and well known. And as it turns out, Renoir was he's one of my favorites, because I can remember the day I was sitting in Western Civilization class, just thumbing through my textbook, and I came across this image, the luncheon of the voting party. And I had never noticed anything like it. It may have been presented to me at some point before, but this was the first time that I really studied the picture, and I looked at the images, and I just thought, wow, I mean, their faces look like they're shining. They look like they're having a great time at this party. The glass looks like you could just reach out and touch it. It's full of textures and so much going on, and all of the different people are just having a good time. Even the lady's got a little doggy with her. Turns out, I think that's Renoir's wife that was in this picture. But anyway, I'd never noticed anything like this before, and that's the point at which I got hooked on art, and I wanted to learn all I could learn about it. So Renoir. And then I remember also seeing my very first actual Renoir painting. Do yourself a favor and get into an art gallery and see some real art. It's one thing to look at it on a screen or in a book, on a print. It's quite another to stand right in front of the original work. There's no way that these can be reproduced in a way that does justice to standing in front of the actual work of art and see it. You can see this girl with watering can in Chicago at the Art Institute in Chicago, and that's where I saw it for the first time. All right, another painter from this period was Gauguin. And Gauguin was kind of known as a ladies' man, but not necessarily a family man, because, well, he had a family in Paris, and he kind of up and left them and went to Tahiti and painted his friends in Tahiti, and never really went back to Paris or his family again, as I understand it. So, but his artwork for the South Seas is well known. And so you should know this image. Okay. And then we move into Pointillism. So Pointillism is kind of an outgrowth of the Impressionism movement. So Impressionism put these daubs of paint down. Pointillism took it to extremes, and it was originated by Georges Seurat, who was another Frenchman, and he painted Sunday on La Grande Jatte. And it's composed entirely of little dots of paint. So he was studying how in science they had discovered that the eye does blending of colors. If you get far enough away from the dots, your eye just naturally sees them as one color, even though they're distinct colors. And so here's a close-up of what those look like. They're just dots of color, and you back up and you can start to see shapes, and then you back up and you see whole images like this. And we look at Pointillism every day. You carry it around in your pocket. That's how all of our digital device screens are composed of dots of light, red, green, and blue in various arrangements and styles, but it's all red, green, and blue, and that's how we see all the colors of the rainbow on our digital screens. We still see Pointillism each and every day. So thank you, Cyril. All right. Now let's move on past the Impressionism and into Post-Impressionism. Probably the most famous person, certainly one of the most successful, he wasn't a success in life, but his paintings are worth the most today, would be Vincent van Gogh. Okay, so he was a Dutch painter. Notice he's using this dotted style that originated with the Impressionists and even into Pointillism, but he kind of made it all his own. So that's a self-portrait that he painted. And then the bedroom in Arles, like I said, my French is terrible. This was his bedroom, like I believe at the psychiatric hospital where he was staying. But just notice the vibrant colors there, and the complementary colors, the yellows, the blues, the reds and the greens, the orange against the blue. All of this makes the colors vibrate. Whenever you put opposites on the color wheel right next to each other, they leap out at you. They make the reds seem redder and the blues seem bluer. So Van Gogh was an expert in the use of line, color, shape, texture, all of the elements of design. And like I said, he was never successful in his lifetime, but after he died, his paintings are now among the most valuable in the world. He's very well known for this Starry Night painting. It's just a surreal view of the sky that only someone like Van Gogh could paint. If you see this painting in real life, all of these lines, all of these sketches, they're three-dimensional. It's an impasto. The oil painting is built up. It's rough. If you were allowed to touch it, you would feel rough ridges on it. You'd never be able to touch this painting, but you could see that it's not blended at all and laid down flat. He painted in this raised style, so it's pretty incredible. All right. He's also the artist who's known for cutting off his own ear, and ultimately he ended his own life. All right, let's talk about Cubism. So Cubism was originated by the likes of Pablo Picasso, who's probably the most famous painter of all time, certainly one of the most prolific painters of all time. He lived a very long life and painted throughout most of it. I think he was 90-something when he died, and so for 70-plus years he was a painter. And so he went through many, many different styles and approaches to painting. But Cubism was one of his very earliest art forms. So we have this Demoiselle d'Avignon painting. He was influenced by African art, and you can kind of see that in some of the faces here. But Cubism attempts to take a three-dimensional object and flatten it out into 2D space and kind of show a cubic nature to it. So this painting was one of the original Cubism works. Another Picasso painting was the girl before a mirror. So here he shows kind of a transformation taking place, or else the young lady, the beautiful young lady, is looking in the mirror, and that's how she sees herself. So there's two sides of the same coin there, how she actually is and how she sees herself. All right, then we have Braque, who also painted in the Cubist style, and Duchamp was famous for nude descending a staircase. So it's kind of traveling through time. This person is walking down the stairs, and in the Cubism style. Duchamp did also a later style we'll look at here in a bit here, but there's a couple there. We'll come back to that. Then there's surrealism. Probably the most famous surrealist is Salvador Dali, and he's instantly recognizable. He always has this look on his face and the wild mustache. And he was Spanish, like Picasso was also Spanish. And so Dali he was interested in the scientific developments of the time. So we get things like persistence of memory in 1931. So he'd been reading and learning about Einstein's theory of relativity about that time, and so this is kind of an artistic depiction of how time can change as you travel through space. It's kind of relative, and then the other one, this Galatea of Spheres, is influenced by his work in atomic theory. This was after the atomic bomb was dropped in Japan, and we started to realize that everything's composed of atoms, everything's made up of atoms, and so that shows up in this picture here. Okay. All right, and Magritte is another famous one. Some of these surrealists, well, I think all of them would have enjoyed Photoshop. They did Photoshop-like work before Photoshop was even imagined. And so here, someone who's knowledgeable in Photoshop could make an image very much like this without a whole lot of effort at all. But this is Magritte. And then we'll move into Dadaism. So back to Duchamp. So he did kind of a parody of the Mona Lisa by putting a mustache and beard on her, and also the fountain. So he was just kind of poking fun at these juried exhibitions of art, and he went down to the local plumbing supply store and got a urinal and tipped it on its side and signed it and called that his sculpture fountain. And so that it was just kind of a playful, joking, not serious at all movement of art. But all of these have been accepted by the art community and are images that you should know. All right, so and then with that, I've got a few more that I just want to run through quickly, and we'll wrap this up. So here's Goya on the 3rd of May. I saw this at the Prado Museum in Madrid, Spain, when I was able to go to Spain, and it was again exciting to see a picture that was in my history book right there before me in the flesh. I was able to come see that work of Goya and a number of his other works. Chagall is a painter from Russia, and he painted I in the Village, and so this is important to his culture and his history, because around the time of the Bolshevik Revolution, or right before that, he was painting scenes of Russia and his home. Here we have Mondrian, who went for this geometric shapes, and there's Kandinsky, again, abstract art. We're getting just more linear forms, less representational. This is Grant Wood, a fellow Midwesterner. He was from Iowa. You can still go see this building in Iowa, the American Gothic painting. And here we have Nighthawks, and this is by Edward Hopper, highly parodied. The first time I showed this painting, and this is the version I showed, without realizing that the TARDIS telephone booth or police box was in the background there. I didn't even catch it. See that? Yeah. This one gets parodied all the time. Edward Hopper. Jackson Pollock, he's also known as Jack the Dripper. He was well known for his splatter paintings. And with that, that's the end of You Should Know This Image. I thank you for your attention, and I appreciate you watching this video, and I enjoyed sharing some of my favorite works of art that I think you should know. Thank you.